Hey, it's the Tudor Dixon Podcast, and I am so excited about today because I have Chris Tomlin with me. And if you don't know, he's amazing all the way around. He's a Christian artist. He's the executive producer of a new film. But also what he doesn't know is that he was on my playlist for my birthing playlist, which is kind of personal. But when I was pregnant with my first daughter, you know, when you are pregnant with your first kid, they're like, you're going to go through and you're going to have this like birth plan and you think everything's going to go really well because you've planned it all out. Well, How Great Is Our God was on there. And honestly, I don't know what I would have done without you because certainly it wasn't what I expected. So Chris Tomlin, welcome to the podcast.
Well, that's quite an honor. Wow. Thank you so much. I've been introduced in many ways, but never like that. So that's the best ever. So thank you.
Well, actually, I told my oldest daughter, I was like, so guess who I'm going to have on the podcast? And I said, and when I went into labor with you, this was on my playlist that day that we listened to as we were welcoming you into the world. So that was pretty cool.
That's really special. So thank you.
It is. So this is very special for me. And I was like, wait a minute, he has this film coming out. I thought music was his thing. You sent us a screener of the film. Awesome. I mean, awesome. I can't wait till it's in theaters because it is just like the Bible. It is so relevant to right now.
It is. You know, how I got involved in this is crazy, right? Because this is not my lane. Movies aren't my lane, but what a privilege that I was approached with from these guys about music. Hey, do you have a song that you could put on the end of this film and that we could use or that could work? And I said, yeah, I think so. I think I got some songs. And so we were talking about, let's see the film. And just like you, I watched it. And immediately I was like, wow, this is so beautiful, so powerful, so well done. And it's so like grounded, so biblically like grounded and right just powerfully accurate. And I was like, man, I'd love to be a part of this. How can we just really connect and lock arms and do something great with this? People need to see this. And so that's what we've been doing. And then they were like, well, what about the music? And I was like, well, I got this song that I haven't played for anybody yet, but I wrote it. I wrote it a little while ago. I've got a demo of it. I'll play you the demo. And I played the demo for the team, the production team. And immediately they were like, this is the song for the movie. And so it's crazy when you watch this movie and then the credits start rolling, you hear this song start. You would have thought that I would have watched this movie and just written the song out of watching the movie.
Wow,
but I
really?
didn't even see the movie when I wrote the song. And so it was one of those moments that worked so perfectly. And I was like, okay, wow, this is God putting things together. And it's just been so powerful. It's like, you know, you put the sails up and let the wind take you. And that's what I've been doing. And people are going to be so moved. Like you said, they're going to be so moved. It's an amazing timing for this movie, obviously around Easter. They'll be so moved by this.
Yeah. And obviously this is a story that most of us are very familiar with. So as you're watching it, you know the story. You're seeing it come to life. And I think you made a comment about worship is about singing, but also about seeing. And I think oftentimes we as Christians kind of feel like, well, if I feel like I need to see it, then is my faith strong enough? But for me, as someone who's very visual, I do see it because I see it in my mind's eye every time I read the story.
Yeah.
But to see it on film like that, it was what my mind's eye is playing out, but it's so powerful and such a good learning tool because not everybody can get access to a Bible or sit and read the Bible. And not every there are unchurched families who will end up at the theater, not expecting what they're going to walk in on. And that's what I love about this. And I think about my own kids who have heard this story so many times. And this story is a story that I said it's relevant to today because you see the pain in Judas's eyes, but that temptation of power and the politics in it, I mean, it's pretty ugly and it's very similar to now.
It's very similar to now. And, you know, I got to go to Israel several years ago and I took a group to Israel. And when I was there, I had these worship nights there and it was so powerful. I was at different sites. And when I was there, it was like the black and white page became color. That's the only way I could say it. It's like everything I'd read. It's like, oh my goodness! Now I'm in the moment. I'm standing where Jesus was standing. I'm singing these songs of worship at the tomb. I'm like, what? It was just a whole nother thing. And then when I saw this film, this movie, it took me back to the same moments of like, it just opens your eyes and you're like, wow. It brings you into the story. And like you said, there's so many amazing characters in the story that kind of develop. This film focuses a little bit on Judas, and what film has ever focused on him? Because it's like that's the guy we don't want to talk about, right? And and then you got Peter, right? And you got these two really opposing disciples. And what I love about it too is like when you think about the disciples, when you think about these followers of Jesus, we think there's some mythical like superheroes now, right? But they were just, it brings you into, these were brothers, they were friends, they were trying to figure out this Jesus they were following. They were like just this ragtag group of guys, and it changed the world, literally changed the world. But when you see it, you're like, oh, and you put yourself there. I did,
Mm-hmm.
there's a beautiful, beautiful thing on the on the marketing, and it says all are welcome at the table. But on every poster, it says all are welcome at the table, and
That's
that's what I
amazing.
hope people walk away with. Because here's Jesus, standing at the table with saying, "This is the moment, right? These guys, this is the reason I came." He's trying to tell them. He breaks the bread, holds the wine, says, "This is my blood. This is my body. I'm about to die. I'm dying for the world, for the forgiveness of sin, all the things." And yet, at the table is Judas, who's going to betray him. Is Peter, who's going to deny him, and they're all there. And what a powerful, powerful picture of Jesus, of forgiveness.
And those are two very different stories that I think have sometimes confused us growing up. And that's what I thought was so powerful about this, because I think you're right. Jesus is in this movie, but you are following two men who are struggling. And those are us, that's the people, that's the church right now. And those are people going, okay, what do I choose here? And I think that there were two different personalities there. One was questioning Jesus, but I do believe that Judas he loved him. He was torn,
Sure.
but he chose greed and power, and he went that direction, even though he had multiple times where even you see Jesus say this is going to happen, and he knows, and you can see that pain. That was what I thought was powerful about it, is you can see the pain and you can see the humanness of him in that moment, and yet he still chooses the wrong path. You have Peter, who is in a similar situation. He loves Jesus, and he believes in him. But suddenly it's very hard to go from a dinner where you're told you are going to reign over all of the tribes. We are going to like essentially rule everything will be ruled by these people here. They think of that in earthly terms, in humanly terms. Jesus is thinking much bigger. That's a really hard thing to reconcile as a human when you see Jesus beaten and Peter panicked. And there's a difference between betrayal and panic.
Yeah, there is. And you put yourself there, right? I mean, I think of myself. There's so many days where I'm just like, I will die for you, Jesus. I'm following you no matter what. I don't care what culture says. I don't care what comes my way. I'm going. And then Peter, just like Peter, he's like, an hour later, some little girl is saying, "Hey, aren't you with that guy?" And he's like, I don't even know who. And how much is that like in us of like, yeah, Jesus, whatever. And then something comes, and your whole faith turns, and that yet Jesus restores Peter at the end, right? It's like, hey, you're my
That to me is something that we need right now. We have so many people that feel like everything's lost and that they can't come back. And that was, to me, again, another moment where you see Peter that is so relatable to today, because he realizes what he's done. And you could take this outside of the context of faith even and say, you see people who realize the sin that they've committed. And when that hits them and they realize the hurt and the pain they've caused others, they think there's no way out. But Jesus is the way out.
Yeah. And I don't want to give too much away of the movie, but there's an incredible scene of Judas. Judas takes his life, right? Because of what he's done. He can't handle it, can't bear it. And Peter sees that. And there's a moment where Peter could go that way, and you got the Satan talking to him. You should do the same. You denied him. You should do the same. And yet Peter's like, no. And he turns and he's like, and then you see Jesus restore him. And I think for people out there who feel that is I keep going back to that, all are welcome at this table, because the forgiveness, the mercy, the love, and whether people know it or not, people are longing for that. There's so much darkness, there's so much brokenness, so much hurt in this world, and yet what the gospel, what the love of God offers, is mercy and grace, and forgiveness, and that's what this movie says. I love that it is the Last Supper, because everything about Jesus is the cross and the resurrection. Usually, focusing on the Last Supper, I thought that's one of the things that really got my attention. And it's these 5 days kind of leading up, this week leading up to that moment. They're telling the story. But what a moment. Like, right, we've done this. At my church, we do it every Sunday. Every Sunday you take communion, right? You take the bread, you take the wine, and most churches do it at some point in the calendar year. And it's for 2,000 years people have done it, but it becomes such a ritual. You just do it. And yet, bringing it back to like the reason why all this is what everything is about, is I love that focus. And I think people who watch the movie will never see it the same.
I agree. I was thinking as I was watching the Last Supper, and they're talking, they're chatting, they're telling stories, and it reminds you of any other family dinner. You watch it and you're like, Jesus knows that tragedy is about to strike, because we all know the story. Jesus knows that tragedy is about to strike. You can see that he's trying to spend his last moments with them, knowing that there is a barrier eventually between heaven and earth. And that is that they can't directly hold him, touch him, sit with him, get his counsel. The Spirit will come, but they don't know that. And it's a different connection, And I think about even losing my own dad and thinking there's a separation. And even though I know I'll see him again, there's a separation. And one of the things that I've struggled with in faith is like, well, for Jesus, he got through this and he was going back to heaven. But the part that was painful is the part that's painful for all of us. The part that was fully man was he loves us and he had to be separated from us.
Yeah.
And you can see that in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You feel the love of God. You feel the power of Jesus again. And like it was the same thing when it all comes to color, right? When I'm going to think about when I was in Israel, it's just like, wow. When you sense that the love of God and the love of Jesus for his people, for his brothers, for his friends, for the people who came for healing and all the things, it's just incredibly powerful.
It is. I mean, and I say to everyone out there, I think the beauty of it was that it was the Last Supper, because you mentioned, some people focus on the crucifixion or the resurrection. And this was really, you get through this time of fellowship and that moment where they are internally struggling with the what now. And that is unique to me, but it was also for all ages. That's what I also loved about it, because you didn't have to, I was like, okay, what's going to happen now? Am I going to see something like, the part that's really hard to watch? But it was the fellowship and the internal struggle and the humanness of us that you go through. And I thought, I want my girls to see this. I want them to know this.
Me too. I've got 3 girls, and my youngest won't, she's too young, but my other one's 13 and 10, and I want them to see this, and I want them to experience this and feel this, because I think, for them so far, it's just been stories we read, and this brings it to life in a powerful way. So I appreciate you saying that, because I think it's going to be so powerful for all ages, for so many generations, and for those who've known been walking their faith for a long time, like me. Still, it pierces your heart, and for those who, that's what I love about this kind of this 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 media, because a lot of people will not walk into the church, but that somehow they'll be brought into this theater and see this in some way. Michael Scott, who produced this film, he said that he was telling me that in like the stats of when they make a film, especially in Christian films, 30 to 40% of the people, of all the people who see it, are not believers. And so how
Really?
powerful is that? What an amazing thing. And so what an opportunity to share. And I think when people walk into this thinking, okay, I've heard Jesus, I've heard about him. I don't know what I think about him. They walk into this, I think they're going to be moved and their hearts going to be pierced, like, whoa, I got to reckon with this. This
Because
is,
you see miracles too. I mean, in this film, you walk through who he was. And I also thought the passion that he had going into the temple and overturning the tables was always hard to envision. What was he really like that day? Because
yes.
I don't know a Jesus that's mad, but he should have been mad.
I love that you brought that point out. That when I told the guys when I first watched it, when I told the team, and I called them, I was like, "This is incredible, guys." And I said the first thing that grabbed me was when Jesus in the temple, when he goes to the temple and he's like, he just had enough, and he's watching it just be destroyed into a marketplace. Um, it's interesting you say that. Michael Scott said they filmed that several times because they felt like they got it wrong a few times, and they brought in these theologians and pastors and said, help me understand, what was Jesus, what do you think he was really doing in that moment? And they said, well, in that moment, in that time, there in the marketplace, in the temple, there was always outside the temple selling things and stuff like that. But this was the Passover, and they were selling all the things that families needed for Passover that they had to have, and they were taking advantage of them because they knew they had to have these things, all these families to do the Passover meal, and they were taking advantage at this moment. And Jesus, and they said that was what sent him, like this what you see in the film. I won't give it away, because I was like, I'll never read that passage again without thinking of this scene, because it's just, wow, he is just taking over, just like, this is not going to happen anymore. And
It was the first time I thought in my head, when I think about that moment in the Bible and that moment in history, it was the first time I went, of course, because he walked in there as God and said, and why would you even hesitate? If you knew everything, you wouldn't hesitate to show your righteous anger.
Yeah, righteous anger. And it was very powerful to me. I think people are going to, I just think people are going to grab a hold. What I love about this movie is that for Christians who are like, oh, God, it's just Hollywood, right? Hollywood's making another film, and what do they know? This is not Hollywood. These are people who love God, who's behind this movie. There's a lot of pastors, theologians, all brought into this to say, hey, we want to make this right. When Jesus talks in this film, you probably gathered that it's pretty much just word of God. It's pretty much Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's pretty much those words. Not a lot of liberties taken. There's a few things in developing Peter, Judas, obviously you got to develop those characters, but I feel like you see the scripture come to life in a powerful way in them, and you feel that, and you realize, this is not just some story, but this is real, and it takes you there, and that's just beautiful. What a great timing, right? Going into Easter, when this Easter season, there's so much going on. There's so much content happening. The world's longing for it, and just to be a part of that, people, and I can't say enough. I think it's going to help people. And that's for me. For me, I just want people to. I've always tried to do that with my music, right? And when you mentioned it earlier, I've always thought, if I can help people see with my songs, then the more you see, the more you sing. The more you see, the more you worship. And so I want people to see God's goodness, His grace, His mercy, be reminded, to remember. In this film, I think this movie is going to do that.
So how did that happen for you? How did music start in your life? I know you have a connection. Actually, it seems like you have a political connection to music in the biblical world. So that's interesting.
It's crazy. So when I first started, I was in high school, and I got asked to do a little a week-long youth week for a little church. I grew up in Texas, and it's this little East Texas church. They're like, we're doing this youth week. We've heard you play a couple songs. I'd only really played at my own church, and no one knows if they're any good if you've only played at your own church, because no one's going to tell you the truth in your own church. And so I'm just out there just doing my thing. And they're like, hey, would you come down the road and play at our youth week in the summer? I'm like, yeah, I'm in high school. I don't know what to do. I said, yes, I'll do this, but I've never done this before outside of my church. And I get a call from this guy, and he's with a deep voice. His name is James. He's like, hey, man, because hello, my name is James. And I said, hey, James. And he said, yes. He said, yes, Chris, I'm speaking at this event. I'm the speaker, and I'm calling you because I hear that you're doing the music, and I've never heard of you before. So just trying to call to see who you are. I was like, well, James, the reason you never heard of me is I've never done this before. And you're calling me at my parents' house. I'm in high school. And, there's this long pause on the phone. And James says, well, what kind of songs do you play? I was like, well, James, and I'm honestly, I said this. I was like, James, I know 3 songs. And he's like, oh, he goes, you got to learn some music. I was like, yeah. So he sends me these tapes and CDs of all these early worship songs. And I just started learning them. And it's all these early worship choruses, right? I love you, Lord. Lord, you're more precious than silver. Some of these early great choruses. And so I learned them all, come to the week, ready to go. My first time ever. All my songs are on note cards. I'd written them all out. I'm scared to death. I put the note cards on the stage. I'm just looking at, grab my microphone, grab my guitar. It's about 500 kids my age, all in high school. I don't look at anybody. I don't say hello. I just scared to death, play my songs, kind of staring at my note cards, singing the songs. I did this every night for 4 nights of the week. James comes to me at the end of the week. He said 2 things. One is, you have no idea what you're doing. I'm like, thank you, James. And he said, secondly, you have no idea how God's going to use you and use your songs all over the world. And he put his hand on my head, and he just looked at me and he said, God, would you make Chris a psalm writer for his generation? And it was like lightning went through me. It was like this marking moment in my life. And started this journey. I'm in high school, started this journey. I looked at him, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, writing songs and having songs. And he said, yes, I've been praying for you this week. I feel like God's been speaking to me that you're going to write songs, and the world's going to sing those songs. And I was just like, I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe someone was speaking that. I mean, I grew up in, a small little town, small little church. We had the biggest church in town, and there was less than 100 people. And it was that kind of thing. My youth group was like 12 people, and I was like, how is this going to? And fast forward many, many years, like you said, this friend James calls me. This is after, I had a career in music, and he calls me about 20 something years later. He's like, Chris, we kind of lost touch a little bit. But he's like, Chris, same deep voice. He goes, I think I want to run for, I think I'm going to be in politics and stop in ministry for a while. And I think God wants me to run for office. And he's in Oklahoma. And I was like, okay. He goes, can you come and help me kind of pay it back? At the beginning, I was kind of helping you. Can you help me? He's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I got a campaign. Can we go to like Walmarts all over Oklahoma? You'll get a crowd and I'll share. And I was like, absolutely. So I did this with my buddy James. He wins. He becomes the U.S. representative, United States representative of Oklahoma. And then I'm watching on TV one day, and I think it's Wolf Blitzer and CNN talking about ISIS. And there's my buddy, and he's a senator, Senator James Langford. And it's like, called him up. I was like, James, when did you become a senator? You were just in Congress. And he's like, yeah, he goes, the Senate seat came up as soon as I got to Washington, and I ran for that. And he's been a senator for many years now and doing amazing things in our country. But if you ever see James on TV, he's this redheaded, deep voice looking senator. If you ever see him on TV, he's on TV a lot. You know that when I was 17 and he was maybe 22, 23, he put his hand on my head. That guy, his hand and said, one day God's going to use you. And it was a few years later. It was a few years ago that he led the National Prayer Breakfast for our nation. James did. He brought me. He said, I want you to come lead it with me. And so can you imagine? You can imagine what was going through my heart, my head. And I'm standing there leading the National Prayer Breakfast with the president, the vice president, and me and James. And it's all the world leaders. And I'm sitting there playing my songs. And I'm thinking, if anybody in this room knew the truth, that down on the other end of this little table said one day the world's gonna sing your songs. And now he's a senator of the United States, and I'm leading in front of the 3,000 leaders around the world. I was saying, God, how do you write these stories? This is incredible. And you just try to walk with him, be available to him, and you never know where he leads.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing, amazing story. God is so good.
Yeah, he is. And he's in the details, he's in the details, and he knows he knows the hearts of people, and he's just looking for people who are available, right? At the end of the day, I heard it said this way: the best ability is availability. And it's just what it is. That's the best ability you can have, is being available, and God will use you.
That's so true. So my girls have winter Bible camp coming up in a few weeks here. The oldest two, so my kids are close to your kids' ages. My twins are 11 and then 13 and 15. So the oldest two were all about it. They're like, we're headed off to camp. And the younger two were a little nervous. So they were going to stay home with mom. And then the church called and they said, this is such a big weekend for us with kids. We really would like them to go. And it was kind of perfect timing, because God's timing is always perfect. We just happened to be painting pottery with all their friends, and their friends were going. So I said, I just got a call from the pastor. They really want you two to go too. And I think these are, like, you tell this story, these are the moments where I see these events where kids come together. There are no cell phones. There's no distractions. It is all about hope and love and the truth.
Yeah, it's it. Oh, how beautiful. And yeah, these are the shaping moments in life. And it definitely was for me.
Yeah, and now look at you. You are amazing. I mean, here you are, all, like he said, there would be people that would sing your songs all over the world. And here I was singing that song to a brand new person that was coming into the world. So I am so grateful for Senator Langford that he put his hand on your head that day, because that was one of the most important days of my life. And you helped me through it without even knowing. So thank you for what you do. Tell us again about the movie. It's a Pinnacle Peak Picture.
Yeah.
And it will come out when exactly?
March 14th is the release date.
Soon.
I have a song, the song No Greater Love, that's on there, comes out a couple days before that. And March 14th is, and I just would encourage people to go to the theaters. This is a moment, like, for people. This film is made so beautifully, but there's something powerful to see it together. When the church so bringing the church together in these theaters, it'd be so beautiful for people to do, and I'm excited for it. So yeah, I hope everybody loves it and enjoys it and is moved, and their heart is just stirred.
I like that idea, though, of bringing the church together to see it. I think I'm going to actually talk to our church about that, because it would be great to get some groups from the church to go and think about, our theaters need this so badly right now, too. What a great combination for people who have been struggling past through the pandemic and getting people back into theaters. This is the moment. And I think this is I was watching this and thinking, this is the film that you want to see on the big screen. You don't want to just watch it on your cell phone. You want to see it in the theater. You want to go there that first day and be inspired by your own life on screen. I mean, honestly, that's what the Bible is. And people are like, oh man, the Bible really hit me. Like, that's because it's really written, because it's our life, and God sees us and God knows us and he loves us. And that's what this movie is all about. And I just thank you so much for being a part of it.
Well, thank you for encouraging people. Thanks for helping us get the word out. I mean, you're part of this as well. You're part of this with me, and letting people know about it, because I think it's going to move people in a great way. So it's going to be beautiful. So thanks for your time today too.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, Chris Tomlin. It's like, honestly, this was a big day for me. So I'm completely geeking out. I'm trying to be cool about it, but I am totally geeking out, and I cannot wait to tell the girls. I am going to go home and be like, so this is what happened today. They're going to think I'm a total dork.
We're friends. We're buddies.
I know. I'm friends with Chris Tomlin. That is what I'm going to do. Oh my gosh. So thank you. Thank you for making me cool for a minute with my kids.
You're awesome. You're so cool. Congrats on everything, all your success. It's insane.
Thanks. Well, you too. Thank you. God is good. Thank you so much. And thank everybody else. Thank you for listening to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Remember, for this episode and others, you can always download it at the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us next time. Have a blessed day.